Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast.
I gotta get up with something, cause something's all up inside of me.
What's happening, all my woods people? Today we have an incredible interview, like one of my favorites that we got to do with a guy named Jared Scheffler. Some of you may know him, some of you may not. Jared has been doing it. He's one of the OGs. He's been doing it for a minute, and he does it from the ground. He does it decoying and calling with a trad bow, and he gets after it. Jared is the, I guess, owner and founder of Whitetail Adrenaline, which is 100% public land, 100% just like reality TV, like the real deal, you know. It's non-sponsored. It's pretty cool stuff. Anyway, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. There's show notes with links to see all of what they've got going on, but we're going to get into that here in a second with him.
Jared drops one of the best non-cliche, like, life isms that you're going to ever hear.
Yeah.
See if you can pick it out.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just glad that it is dry right now at my house.
Finally.
Because, good grief,
My
dude.
goodness.
We've had so much rain this spring.
Hey, it was a 4.5 incher one day and a 2.5 the next day.
It's ridiculous.
That's 7 inches of rain in like 3 days.
Yeah. And that's not like the only rain we've had. It's been some pretty substantial rains other than that. And I don't know, what stinks about it is that like we've been wanting to, we're working on a lot of different things right now, and not like that we're currently working on them, but they're like in the process of being done. And one of those things is a series that we're trying to put together that is kind of being hindered by the rain. And so it's frustrating because now it's going to be snake season, and it's going to be floodwaters covering up all the sign from last year. And it's just like, man, this stinks. But anyway, we're glad that it's dry right now. Hopefully, I don't know, I hadn't looked at the weather report extended.
Hey, it's great.
Does it look
now.
good?
We have like a 40% chance on one day in the next 10 days.
Good.
Things are about to be popping.
Yeah,
Things
there's
are gonna
going to be some
grow.
growth happening.
I guarantee
your
you.
garden's going to be going off.
It
Probably,
is,
huh?
dude. I just got most of my watermelons in today. So,
Oh, yeah?
got a big farmer's. So, a farmer's tan is not what you think it is.
Okay.
A farmer's tan is a sunburn on your back and still a white belly in the front. That's
Really?
what a farmer's tan really is, because that's what I've got right now, and I've been farming. So,
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what you
yeah, my
claim it
back
to
is
be.
very sun. Like, I was out. I took my shirt off for about 2 hours today.
Oh, no.
And I'm red.
Yeah.
It's bad.
I would bet.
It kind of caught up with me.
You're going to get that flaky back
I
going on.
know.
It's so embarrassing because you can't see it. And everybody's going to be looking at the back of your
Sorry,
shirt
dude.
just shedding everywhere.
They either think I'm fishing or I've been working hard, so they gonna know I'm a real dude.
You're not just a red neck, you're a red back.
That's right, dude.
Dude, speaking of red things, we got a red message in our email this morning. I looked at it, which this is a couple days prior to when you guys will probably hear it. But we got a message saying that Facebook had disapproved an ad, which I'm not sure if that's how you're even supposed to say that, but Facebook said it that way. So we were trying to run an advertisement on our nameless film because I finally posted it to Facebook, not just the link, but like the actual video. I uploaded the whole thing. It took me forever. I was hoping people would appreciate this and that we could bring people into the gospel of the element and let people enjoy that thing, right? And we got shut down by whoever reviewed that video. I'm sure somebody was appalled at Facebook that watched our video and said, this is possibly shocking to other users. And
I just don't get that, man.
I don't either. I earlier this week, for you listeners, I ran a big story on the Instagram, and you might have seen it, you might not have, but showing, just some screenshots from the nameless video. And I was like, you know what? Let me just go through and find the most shocking moments from a person who, say, is an anti-hunter or doesn't hunt. And like, I was confused. Like, there's one instance, obviously, where there's a little slow-mo shot in the playback. It's not even during the regular motion. But we played back a 3-second clip of slow-mo of the arrow going and hitting the deer, right? Mm-hmm. No blood blows up everywhere. There's no hole. Like, it's just an arrow sticking out of a deer. It runs off real quick. There's some video of us like laughing in the tree because we're so excited and so happy that we actually accomplished what we had set out to do. There's a couple of shots of like blood on some grass. I mean, it's not like grotesque. It's artfully done, I thought, like tastefully done. And then there's the buck laying there, obviously, at the end, And so like those are the only shots. I don't know there's like even monologues in there that try to show respect and like gratitude for the situation that I'm in and stuff. I don't know. Anyway, I was very confused, and I feel attacked as a hunter, really. And I recently read an article. The RMEF had a Google ad that they had that wasn't approved or canceled or something like that. Have you seen that?
No, I hadn't.
Well, they kind of fought it, and apparently Google did the right thing and like reapproved it. But RMEF has, politicians on their board, right?
Yeah,
we don't.
It's one of the bigger conservation orgs out there.
Yeah, and so anyway,
well funded. At least.
I was hoping, I tagged some of these big groups, just hoping to get some support, and I don't even know if they viewed the story, and I'm sure they get tagged a lot.
What stinks is there's no answer to this because I know there's other alternative like social media outlets like that are geared towards hunters or whatever, but I don't want to live in a box. I want to our whole idea is to try to produce things that are tastefully done that where people who may or may not really hunt still enjoy what we do. And if it's being restricted and those people can't see it, it kind of defeats. You're shooting yourself in the foot,
Yeah, and the thing is most this particular ad, not that we've we do this all the time, but this particular ad was aimed towards hunters. Mm-hmm. So what are they going to be shocked about? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
But for the people, like you said, the people that you want to bring light to the situation to and let them understand this thing, we hope to do that, and I can guarantee you that even the posts that we just put out there, we don't try to advertise or whatever, they're being shut down in a way. You know what I mean? I just know how many people follow our page and their grassroots follows, and how many people actually see our posts, and it's a fraction.
Yeah.
They're being stifled. So I don't know what to do about it, but I know, even we tried to post a picture of your spike buck that had an arrow sticking out of it. Another artistic shot. Mm-hmm. No blood, just an arrow sticking out, and it was denied. It's just, it just drives me crazy.
Oh my goodness,
anyway,
things die, Tyler.
They do.
Can you believe? Oh man,
I know. How do we eat?
I don't know.
Something has to die. Right?
It's just a world that's becoming out of touch with itself.
That's true. That's a good point. It's another good lifeism.
It is. It's a lifeism.
Oh man. So anyway, speaking of out of touch, man, there's some people in this world that think they know about certain things that don't have a clue, aren't there?
Tyler and I were just on a rage fest earlier this week, and it's just one of those mornings where it's just everything's getting to you. And there's a collaboration or a collective, you might say, of people out there in media that's pretty well known. That I respect a lot of the people on their team, but there's a couple on there that just really make you scratch your head. And I don't know. Sometimes they just spew out. They just really like to hear themselves talk, and maybe I do that too. And if I do, I'm sorry. Let me know if I do, and I'll stop. But like, man, if you're not an expert on something, just don't, or just claim like you don't know stuff. Or
it's okay to not know.
It's okay, and it's okay to not like have to be like cracking jokes every 15 seconds about things that are slightly maybe something you should be a little bit more serious about. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man.
Dude.
And it's just if you're not. There are certain cultural things that some people may hold a little bit sacred, and that's okay if those people do that. Don't try to like take that and rake it through the mud.
Yeah.
Because that's just not. It's not okay. It's not cool. Like, I'm gonna be. There are things that city people do that I'm like, what on earth, right? Yeah. But I don't like just rage about it and go on and just talk about how stupid it is and make it seem like it's a worse thing than it really is.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know, dude. I mean, I don't know. It's hard. The bad, it's the saying, the cliche now is the bad apple cliche that you hear. Like can ruin the whole thing. And for me, in this situation, like I'm struggling to like you said, I've respected this group, but I'm struggling to continue to support and to continue to pay attention when there's a few things and a few people that are in charge of things that are just so, in your words, maybe, what were your words that one time we were texting about? It was like,
I don't know.
I was like, you were like, he's the worst. And I was like, the worst, something. You said the worst human or something. I can't remember. It was something so funny. I wish I could have quoted it. But anyway, yeah, not everybody's a textpert about everything, right?
That's right, man. That's right. And, I don't mean to air dirty laundry about anybody, but I just wish that people would stay in their lane. That's about all there is to it.
Yeah, man. I mean, just do what you know and be happy with it. And I mean, it's okay to be a little bit simple sometimes, man. And just it's okay to learn from people, man, and not. I don't know. Anyway,
it's another cliche. It's the 2 ears, 1 mouth thing.
Yeah,
that's one of the better cliches out there.
Yeah,
like you can live by that one.
Yeah, I don't hear that one all that much though. Even
do you not?
I don't think that's something our generation wants to say too much.
Maybe not. It's not a millennial thing to say.
Yeah,
but
they got 1 mouth and no ears. Maybe I don't know.
Or big gauges in them or something, right?
yeah. Hey, I'm all about gauges, man.
Are you?
They give you extra hold.
20s or 12s?
Yeah, I'm more of a 12 gauger kind of. Anything new on the elk front, dude? That I haven't, because we haven't talked a whole lot in the last few days about stuff. But
not super revelation.
Like I want you to be like, I found the spot.
Oh, I know the spot. It's Unit 16B in New Mexico. But I don't know. I guess I'm leaning a touch more towards mobile and doing the bivvy thing than I used to be. I'm not saying that I'm going to do it every night.
Talking about the Cody Rich thing.
The Cody Rich thing.
Okay.
Maybe not going out every 3 days like he talked about, but like I just see. Okay, for instance, I've been watching the Born and Raised Outdoors guys on YouTube. Like those dudes are good. They have a good production, but they do the like camp where you're at every evening, right? And I can see where like you're gonna say like get an extra hour of sleep at night because you don't have to walk back to camp.
It's important.
Like that's for real important.
Yeah.
And like you get to wake up and hunt right where you are. You don't have to walk places. You know. I don't know. There's some redeeming factors about it. But that's
we had a listener send us a really good suggestion on some tents.
Yeah, for real. Those Lux, is that what
Lux tents? I think
fairly inexpensive, supposed to be pretty good.
Lightweight, dude.
Yeah.
The one I started looking because I hadn't seen the one that you were talking about when you were texting me. Mm-hmm. And I started looking at it. I was like, dude, it's like less than 4 pounds or like 4 pounds.
It's
exactly.
like 2.3, and then if you add the
outer,
whatever it is. There's also an interesting thing about that called a bathtub. Did you see the bathtubs?
Yeah.
It's like it's just, you're still running a floorless shelter, but you put a floor in that's got like a perimeter, so like bugs and stuff don't get up in your business at night. It's like the best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah.
I like it.
I guess I misunderstood that. So like I was thinking the bathtub was for like rainwater Does it come in your like standard tent buy there?
No,
or do you have to buy it extra.
You have to buy it extra. So
I got you.
The way it works, from what I understand.
So you're talking about if you just ran the outer and a bathtub.
Yes.
I got you.
Yeah. So no like screen on the inside.
No inner. Or
yeah. No like whatever floored area net thing or whatever, and you just run like a floorless and then run a bathtub inside. It's like glorified Tyvek. So and it would be like if you put a kiddie pool inside of your tent. Yeah. But it's really lightweight. Like you're talking about a sleep shelter that weighs 3.5 pounds with stakes. That's pretty good.
It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty lightweight.
And it's not $500.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You can get into that for like $170 or something like that.
Yeah, that's about right.
I can do that, man.
That's what I thought, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for sending that.
It's one of those tent pole, or not tent pole, I'm sorry. What are they called? Trekking pole.
Yeah, center pole.
Setups, right? So it's a little bit different.
Which you can do it with even like a piece of wood out in the woods if you wanted or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not like it has to be a specific. It's like it needs to be a decent sized piece of stick, basically.
Yeah. Sure. That was John Sawyers who sent that to us. Thanks, John.
Cool. Yeah, that was good suggestion, man. We're definitely looking into it, and it looks like something we might be buying. But anything else on the elk front?
Just hype, dude.
Yeah, it's definitely hype, man. Like I ran pretty good. I did pretty good this morning on my run, despite having a really busy weekend. Staying up real late, doing weddings and stuff like that.
I ate out way too much this weekend.
Did you?
Yeah, I ate out 3 times.
I ate pretty good this weekend.
But sometimes, like I went and helped Brennan. We put in his whole floor in one day. And when you do that, like sometimes it's just like, bring me some food.
Oh, yeah.
And
I
so,
know.
and that's just what you got to do sometimes.
That's how I am, man. Like when I go play a gig.
Yeah.
Like I've been playing a lot of gigs in Van Zandt County, and Dairy Palace is down that way. So,
dude, that ice cream! Oh my goodness,
dude! And they got like
Have you had the mint chocolate chip?
It's
like it ain't chocolate chips; it's chocolate bars off in there.
In mint
ice cream. Yeah.
See, I'm not a mint chocolate
dude.
guy.
You need to be. It's good.
I know.
I would imagine that their chocolate chip ice cream probably is the same way. I don't know if you like that or not.
Might have to do that. Yeah, but I'll tell you this, dude. After the turkey hunt, I mean, I've known this, but because I get it a lot, but it's just hard to beat cookie dough, chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream.
That Texas two-step is revolutionary. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I've had it. What is it?
It's chocolate chip. Well, it's chocolate chip ice cream mixed with cookie dough ice cream. So you get the best. No. Chocolate chip cookie dough. And they add cookies and cream. That's what it is. So you got chunks of Oreo and chocolate chip cookie in there.
Dirty. That sounds
it's
like
bad to the bone.
Sounds like the fuzziest teeth you could ever imagine.
Oh, I love it, dude. Give me all the fuzz.
Well, we probably need to get into this real quick. I wanted to tell you guys something real quick, and this is this is not a paid advertisement or sponsorship, but you guys know that we've worked closely with some of our friends at Exodus Trail Cameras, and they're having a 4-year anniversary. Where they're doing discounts on their website. I don't know all the details. I don't have them in front of me, but I think it lasts from May 17th through the 28th or so. So I think when this releases, it will be the next day, all the way through the 28th. Just go check them out. Say hi. Tell them the Element Guy sent you. Like I said, this is not paid advertisement or sponsorship or anything like that. We just like those guys.
You're supposed to say that fine print stuff real fast. Don't you know that?
Yeah. That'd be up your alley because I'm just not a fast talker sometimes. Anyway, I guess it's about time to talk to Jared. I appreciate you guys hanging with us through this long episode, and I know that you're going to get a lot of really valuable information from Jared because I know I did. Not to say that you aren't a better hunter than me, but he's got a lot of good things to say.
So this is pre-recorded, of course, and during the interview, I wrote down on my paper, "This is fun."
Yeah.
Showed it to Tyler. We agreed.
It had to come out, dude.
That's
It was so much fun that we just had to put it on paper.
That's right.
So anyway, let's get Jared on the phone, man. You cool with that?
Yep.
All right. So now on the phone we have Jared Scheffler from Whitetail Adrenaline. What is happening, Jared?
How you guys doing? I just got my hands full in this edit right now.
Yeah.
That's the story of my life lately, for the most part, in a nutshell.
So that's what things look like for you this time of year is There's really no velvet scouting, no trail camera stuff going on. It's pretty much just I'm editing in a cave and becoming a vampire every day, right?
Sorta, in a nutshell. We're getting things a little bit more under control, believe it or not. I mean, some people would probably still have their doubts after last year's and the year before's late release, but things are shaping up a lot better this year. And I mean, it's funny you mentioned pre-scouting and stuff like that, because that's actually something I haven't done since 2008. So I'm kind of fly by the seat of my pants.
Yeah.
But our style of hunting just allows us to still be very successful in the fall, even though we haven't done all that. I mean, obviously pre-scouting and all that can give you a great advantage, but it's not necessarily the end of the world if you don't have the time to do that or whatnot.
Right. So what can you give us a little hint on what you're editing right now?
Well, right now we're working on the bow and the gun videos that we filmed last fall, much of which I wasn't there for because I was still editing last year because of a big project. But the good news is we're a lot further ahead than we've been actually in quite a few years in overall, as far as where the production's at. So we're actually really excited about it, believe it or not.
Awesome.
I am, especially because I didn't really get much hunting in last year. And things are shaping up well. I mean, we're everything's looking very, very promising for like an August 1st or first week of August release.
Awesome.
And I don't think I think that's going to happen.
And so that will free you up for the whole season then, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm very excited about that. The last 2 years I have had to, I didn't get started until later into the fall, which has never happened before, but the last 2 years it did. And now like this year, actually our gun video is very near completion already. So we're moving on it.
Awesome, man. So, does that mean if you get an August release, does that mean you're going to be in the elk woods at any point in September?
I will be a little bit. I'm not exactly. I'm kind of keeping my options open a little bit. I might dive back into doing a little bit of early season whitetail again.
Yeah.
I haven't done that the last few years, mainly just because I didn't enjoy it as much as rut whitetail hunting, and I thought, well, I'll try elk, and I really do enjoy the elk side of things, but I might throw in an early season whitetail hunt again here.
That's cool.
But yeah, I'm planning at least one elk bow hunt, and the elk bow stuff, as some people know, that's a whole nother video that is probably going to be about 2 years, maybe 3 years before that releases, but it's going to be a pretty special one when it does.
Cool, man. So the early season thing is something that I am hoping to pull together as well this year. Pretty excited about that. And I want to get pretty deep on some decoy tactics at some point, some of that all the on the ground game kind of thing. But I kind of first just want to start with a wide look at this thing. What you guys do is, you just kill giant bucks on public land. It seems like a lot. So we'll
sometimes we miss a lot too.
Yeah, you have good encounters, for sure.
Yeah, we have good encounters. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I like that.
Yeah. So
you guys have a lot of great encounters.
Hey, and that's part of it, man. Is that I mean, really, I learned that a lot last year. I felt like it was just this whole the closer you get and over and over again, the sweeter it is when the success comes, sometimes.
Right.
So
right. And there's definitely a transformation process between hunting from like a tree stand or a ground blind. I'm not trying to take anything away from that, but there's definitely a lot more variables in the crunch time situation of making it come together when you're face to face on the ground and it's just you and that animal. I've just found that everything's just a lot less planned, so to speak.
Yep.
Sometimes you don't have time to range find things. If you're a compound shooter, you don't, I mean, sometimes you do, sometimes you're graced with that opportunity or that, or whatnot, but you don't have that. A lot of times those animals, especially when you're filming, you got two guys there. A lot of times they've already got you pegged by the time you're trying to get a shot off, and then you're trying to predict, like, okay, are they going to duck? How much are they going to duck? Are they, and everything's just rushed, and it all happens, at the snap of your fingers, and it's an adrenaline
rush, right? That's
yeah, it is. That's exactly why I love to do it, though. Is it's the biggest adrenaline rush in hunting, in my opinion, is face to face with that animal, just you and that animal.
Right.
So
right.
that's what's addicting about it.
Well, awesome, dude. So we'll get to that face to face point in a little bit, and I want to start wide here, and we'll just kind of like, I want to try to take us through this journey where we're the farthest we are from a buck, and then through the process of getting closer up into the point that you lay hands on the buck. So if you're good with that, then I want to kind of start. If Jared Scheffler wanted to hunt a new state, where would he start in his preparation?
Well, it depends on what I'm looking for, as far as, like, do I want to hunt a more like open plains state, or a mixed vegetation, or a wooded? I've done plains now pretty heavily for the last number of years, but I'm kind of like, the calling of the woods is kind of getting back in my blood a little bit, just because I've done so much of the prairie and the wide open stuff. Sure. So, essentially what I'm going to look for is, because I focus on public land hunting and everything. So I'm going to focus on, like, if I'm going to do like a wooded state, I'm going to look at, okay, what states within a decent proximity of me are going to offer a decent amount of public acreage and have a decent amount of big bucks coming out of those states or out of those areas, and I have a little bit of an upper advantage, I'd say, so to speak, just because I've gone to shows over the years. And so I hear, from people at some of these shows, like, so I got a little bit of a general, just overall feeling of, okay, there's a lot of big bucks being shot in Ohio, or there's a decent amount in Illinois, or, like, Illinois used to be really hot, but actually I haven't heard as much about Illinois over the past, like, decade as you did 15 years ago. Illinois was, in my opinion, you heard all about Illinois 15 years ago as it being a really hot state, and I don't hear much about Illinois. So, and a lot of that, I think, came when they raised the tag prices to $500 or whatever. Yeah. I think a lot of people opted out of hunting Illinois. So I've never hunted Illinois, but it has my interest right now, just because I do think that the potential there is to get on mature, good quality animals is pretty good on public land. Ohio's another one that I haven't gotten to. So I would look at, Wisconsin. I'm not a great big fan of Wisconsin public land hunting in general.
Is that home for you guys?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's fun to do. Like, I grew up here. I grew up doing deer drives. It's what I was, born into, essentially, around a big public land swamp. And so I miss it. I haven't done it as much the last couple of years, but as far as, like, okay, I want to go hunt, some good quality deer or mature deer, it's not on my top of the list, I guess, so to speak. Yeah. I am planning to do some more Wisconsin this year, because I do still enjoy it. It's just not, a top state for me, so to speak.
When you're talking about like the proximity of states, like what's kind of your radius on that? Like, what's too far to really be looking at as like a consistent place to go hunt?
For me, I'll go. I mean, Ohio, or, I've even got some interest to do Pennsylvania and some of the Northeast at some point. Yeah. Expecting to maybe potentially, most likely, not fill my tag there, but just to document that type of hunt unfold. Yeah. So for me, I will go quite a ways. We've even went as far as Idaho for whitetails.
That's cool.
Specifically. Yeah. Which actually led us into beginning to elk hunt Idaho the following year. And that's been a very successful hunt for us on the elk side of things. So we've went a long ways. I mean, we've done Montana and Wyoming, and I actually did a little bit in Colorado too that hasn't made video yet. So obviously you just can't get it all out there, but but if I don't allow distance to really be a deciding factor generally, like if it's a good quality state and I got time to slip it in or whatever, I'll go there. The difference between 500 miles and 1,000 miles is 7-hour extra drive.
Yeah.
Well, I'll gladly drive 7 extra hours if I think that I'm going to have a more successful hunt, or if I have a really good, like obviously northeast part of the country isn't maybe necessarily phenomenal deer hunting, but I think it would be a cool adventure hunt. And it has my interest in that regard. So that wouldn't scare me off just because of the distance, so to speak. It's got more to do with timing as far as some of those states go. But so let's say that you've decided on a state, and you used to be able to, there's a lot of hype for a long time to look at Boone and Crockett record books and things like that, entries to determine, which counties and which states maybe you should look at. What I realized years ago, and why I don't look at all of that stuff, is because that's what a lot of other people, I don't know if it still applies, but a lot of other people I felt looked at those things as well. And so from a public land perspective, you ended up, I noticed, I felt like the pressure levels were higher in those areas on public land, which then made the public land not as good as maybe more mediocre areas that didn't get as much attention, but still have quality, deer on them. The truth is almost everything good that I've ever found has just been literally out there in the field doing, finding it on your own. We haven't been tipped off. It was just fluke kind of being out there in the field. So when I decide on a state, generally, obviously before I head there, I want to, if I'm not constricted to a zone, obviously some states you have zones, so you have to decide, okay, I'm going to apply for this zone in this state, which then limits me to a portion of that state. But let's just say it's a statewide tag. Okay. So at that point, I'm going to probably research and take a look at, where the bigger cities are. And I'm going to try and get an idea of, anything outside of 45 minutes to an hour drive from big cities generally doesn't get hit as much. Okay. So, and I treat that with a grain of salt. I'm not going to say that I wouldn't necessarily hunt something close to a big city if I feel like it's an overlooked piece or whatnot. It's all about, whitetails generally just don't like people. Okay.
Yeah.
So, if you just, it sounds silly when you say that, but that's the truth. Yeah. And so, the general idea with public land for a long time was go deep, get away from people. But you can go deep. That's one way to do it. You can look for stuff that's overlooked. That's another way to do it. Or you can look for stuff where you need to use a canoe, boat access, et cetera, et cetera. So generally when I go, they don't get hunted like that in that wide open plain stuff by other hunters. So I don't have as much challenges in that regard. I have different challenges as far as how we're going to get close, because sometimes it's very difficult. But, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to zone in on pockets and areas that are overlooked or don't have the hunting pressure. And I'm just treating it with a grain of salt with what I feel when I'm deciding on a state or an area of a state. Like, do I feel like this is going to have much pressure? And when I say I treat it with a grain of salt, I don't get too wrapped up in this is the spot in my, like, I don't try and predict it before it actually happened. That's called a fantasy.
Yeah. Man,
and I've found that many times those fantasies we believe to be a reality, and then when we get there and it's not quite the way that we fantasized it, we're scrambling and we don't know because our plan is falling apart because it was a fantasy, and therefore we almost feel like our hands are tied. Like what do we do now? What do we do next? And so I like to, the goal is to put a good deer on the ground, right? But the plan should be, so the goal is in stone, the plan is in sand. So basically if I'm going to a new state, let's just say that I've identified this area as, I got a general good feeling about it. Like it's away from big cities, or it looks like it's a piece or an area that's overlooked. Generally what I'll do is I will kind of premeditate, 5, 10, 15 pieces of public in that area. And I'll spend that first day or that first part of that day driving around each one of those pieces. Even if it was in wooded terrain, I would probably do that, unless I come to, let's just say that I show up in that area and I pull up to the first spot and do my drive-by or whatever. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to evaluate, like, one, how it looks. Does it look like it's getting much pressure? If so, from which angles is this public getting pursued from? You know, because maybe there's a part of that public that people are overlooking or whatnot. But I'll generally spend that first day or that first part of that day driving around several. And then by the end of that, I'll make a determination on, okay, spot 3 and 6 are the overall best feeling I have about it. Or sometimes I end up being like, you know what? I completely misjudged this or misread this as maybe being great. I don't get a good feeling about any of it, and I'll completely abandon ship. And that might lead me to a whole nother part of the state on a whole new massive journey of starting over from zero. And that's I think, you know, partly why in some hunts people have seen a decent amount of car footage from our videos is, you know, I'd much rather be out there in the field, but I'm also trying to, like I said, I don't do any pre-scouting and haven't since 2008. And really that was just like once or twice in the spring, just going through a swamp. So it's not like I gained a whole lot of knowledge from it, but I used to do a lot of that stuff, but I got busy with the business and stuff, going to shows, didn't have the time to do it. And so I had to have a hunting style that allowed me to still get great results in the fall, which an aggressive style will do that.
Right.
And so because I don't have that pre-scouted knowledge of, you know, 10 different pieces in my back pocket, you know, to basically tap into, I end up spending a little bit more time, quite a bit more time in, you know, in the vehicle, just trying to diagnose where I want to actually go into or spend my time in.
Yeah.
You know? And some of those states, like the Plains states, that's kind of almost the only way that it makes sense is to actually stay in the vehicle until you get your visual, because I mean, what are you going to do on 160 acres of knee-high grass? You can look out there. You can scan it with binoculars. Maybe you can catch a rack above the grass, and we've done that at times. And, you know, I remember a few years ago, we killed a real good buck doing just that, just stopping the vehicle and glassed his rack in the grass and was able to get that deer. But generally speaking, you can look out across that stuff, see there's no, you know, there isn't a deer there, and so you keep driving on to the next piece. And so it wouldn't make sense for us to just go, you know, go out there into 160 acres of knee-high grass in a lot of those cases.
Right.
Yeah, how do you evaluate that property in such a split second? Like, you know, a lot of those properties are going to have some terrain that you can't really see from the road, right? And sometimes it's quite a bit, and you might be missing things. But are you willing to take that gamble and try to stick with the windshield time and find like the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, like I said, basically what I would do is, okay, let's just say you got a half a dozen spots in a 15, 20 mile radius area that you're going to go drive by. Okay. I'm going to generally speaking, unless I get a really, really strong feeling about something or I get a visual on a big buck, I'm generally speaking going to drive by each and every one of those and the whole perimeter of it by the roads before I come to a conclusion like, okay, spot 2 and spot 4. And maybe it is exactly like what you said. Maybe, you know, it's just simply, hey, this piece looks like it's getting pressured, but, you know, a mile and a half back in here over these 2 ridges is a drainage system or whatever that most people probably aren't getting to. And I can't see it. I can't survey it. I'm just going off of my feel at that point. So now I'm going to devote some time to hoof back in there and check it out. And, you know, sometimes that's productive, you know, quite often it also isn't. And a lot of times people don't end up seeing that in video because nothing actually happens. Sometimes they do, but you know, that's my general, kind of roadmap for targeting a new state or an area.
Do you think that like the lack of pre-scouting that you do allows you to enter those like hunt scenarios with more of an open mind? Like I can see, like for me,
Absolutely.
for instance, looking at maps as much as I do, like I have some preconceived notions of properties, and I'm like, man, that's the one I want to hunt. When honestly, I should probably show up and just take it for what it is.
Right. I call it emotional attachment is what I call it.
Yeah.
No, and I don't mean that in like a bad way. It would generally happen to anybody because we're human. And then our imagination runs wild, and the same can be applied to when you run trail cam pictures or trail cameras and stuff, and you get those photos. The same kind of thing can happen where you begin to get attached to an area or a deer, and sometimes that can hold you back from pulling the plug on a spot that maybe, I guess put it this way. Let's use a real example here. Let's say you've pre-scouted a place in the spring. You found all these rubs, all these scrapes. You get all jacked up about it. You've figured out where you're going to put your tree stand or set up on the ground or whatever method you're going to do. And then you come back in the fall, and let's just say all of a sudden now it's overrun with hunters. Or the crops that border it, or sometimes some public lands do have crops on it. Maybe the crops changed, and now those deer aren't running the same types of patterns or doing the same types of things. And also, maybe you got a 5-day window for your hunt. Maybe all of that activity from everything that you found in the spring happened, at a different 5-day period. Maybe you're 2 days too late or 4 or 5 days too early, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are all real scenarios. I mean, if it was really as easy as just going and finding some rubs and some scrapes and some sign in the spring and then setting up on it, and in a day or two you kill, I mean, we'd all be killing big bucks all the time, right?
Some guys make it sound that easy, but not sure they're telling the truth, all of them.
well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's all evidence of big buck activity in that area for sure. But what you're talking about is big buck activity from the fall before, and you got to treat that a little bit. You got to treat it with a grain of salt, in my opinion. Like, I think ultimately, if you can pre-scout and not have any of your preconceived notions, not build a big fantasy about how it's going to come together, but just keep in mind that it could all crumble in the fall, I think you have a little bit better starting point than my my method, I guess. That's the one advantage to, in my opinion, to pre-scouting and all of that and running cameras and things, is you do have, likely several locations that you've been able to eliminate a decent amount of acreage, and you've got a decent amount of areas and spots and locations where you can plug into. So if spot A, if you get there in the fall and it's not happening, then you got spot B and C and D that you've kind of already, but I think if you go about it in an aggressive manner where you don't get too hung up on what you thought, I think a lot of hunters do that. I think it's just in our human nature to kind of do that. Yeah. Like, we have all, from the time we found that sign in the spring, we have all that spring and then the summer months to really just imagine how it's going to all unfold. And then, like I say, in a public land scenario, a lot of variables can change that and make that not a reality. And then we're left back to the drawing board. And a lot of people don't know how to get back on that drawing board. I shouldn't say a lot of people don't know how to, but they aren't prepared for it. They haven't mentally thought about that as a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that so bad for this upcoming season. I'm just going to be honest. And now I do think that, like, I'm ready for something to be different, but man, I know exactly the place I want to be sitting November 7th to try to kill this 150 class 8-point. Like, and it's going to happen in my mind, and it probably will be a letdown, but I think you really are hitting on something where you need to just have that plan B, C, D, and E ready to go for when, like, your fantasy doesn't come to fruition.
Exactly. I think you've got a great advantage by the pre-scouting and different things. And don't get me wrong, I use information from last fall of what I seen, or if I've hunted a spot prior, I'll use that information the next season the same as you would as a pre-scout session, but I treat it with a grain of salt. And oftentimes I have seen where it's just not as productive as it was the year before. For whatever reason, I don't try to dissect and I don't spend a whole bunch of time trying to diagnose why it's not hot anymore. I just chalk it up as, they're wild animals, and, they change. I mean, they just, that's what they do, and I mean, sometimes it's pretty, drawn in the sand, like, oh, this place is way more heavily pressured this year than last year, and that's why. You know, but I don't spend a whole, I'm not going to spend 2-3 days playing around on this piece that it's pretty obvious is not like it was last year, or isn't holding up to the sign that I found this spring, if I were to go that direction and pre-scout, if that kind of makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So,
I definitely made that mistake last year on a piece here in Texas of public, and which I'm surprised you didn't mention that you wanted to come to Texas to hunt all of this public down here. But
yeah, well, to be honest with you, there's actually a handful of public pieces down there in Texas. I got a buddy down there that, and I've heard about a couple of them. I don't know, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, a guy had told me about some, and I was like, really? Texas has public land? I didn't even know that down there, right?
Yeah, I know.
But then I got to know this buddy of mine, Clayton, from down in Texas, and he kind of informed me of some different public lands down there that he hunts and stuff. And there's some good caliber deer from my understanding on public down there. But I mean, you only have so much time in the fall.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's man, I honestly, I was definitely making a joke, making light of it a little bit. It is pretty tough, man. And as far as like open public, that's not draw here in Texas, there's not a whole lot, but anyway, back to what I was saying is, I kind of got in that same groove. I was hunting a buck. I was emotionally attached, and I was on a property, and I was all over him, except for I was probably like a week late. It just guys started piling in there and taking their off time during early November and crashing in there when we were hunting. And I just thought, man, well, he's used to some pressure because it's Texas, it's public, and anyway, spent a lot of wasted time over there probably. And so it makes sense, and not to mention another thing you said, about just like, not necessarily map scouting to find spots, but just, getting in there and looking at it and seeing it and understanding it that way visually. Our best spot, when we have one spot that is just like much higher above any of the other spots as far as just buck activity and mature bucks on public. And it's one of those spots that like KC just found because he was out there one day just looking, just had his binos up and was looking around, was like, hey, I noticed some deer moving over here. Let's go over here, So
yeah, right.
It's crazy how that works.
Right. That's how, primarily almost everything that we've ever discovered has been out there in the field. Any pockets and whatnot. I mean, whether it's running optics or just going off of your gut feeling, like, hey, I got to go back in here and check out this little nook or this little cranny of, where I think they aren't getting bugged or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, it's the mother lode or whatnot, or it's mm-hmm. crawling with, bucks or deer activity or whatnot. Right. So, I know it's a little bit of a different style for a lot of people, but I think back to, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, I used to be like, oh, I can't hunt South Dakota, or I can't hunt Nebraska, or I can't hunt this state until I go pre-scout it. Like, that was my mentality. Mm-hmm. Like, I have to go out there and I have to pre-scout. I have to know. I have to have this plan. And what I've found over the years is, I obviously I don't do any of that now, but back then I felt like I needed to before I actually went hunting, Mm-hmm. And with an aggressive style like that, like literally I could, if it was hunting season right now, I would feel not unprepared at all to be like, okay, I'm going to go hunt Illinois. I've never hunted there before. Boom, jump in the vehicle and head there and just start bird dogging it.
One of the big problems I have in that scenario is having the confidence to know that whitetails exist there. Like, how do you get over that hump? Do you just assume?
Like, what do you mean? Like, good quality whitetails live there?
Yeah, or just, if you're talking about like marginal more stuff, like some of the more Western stuff, like where I know y'all spend a lot of time. Like, there's just this fear of a state that I've never been to. I'm going to show up, and it's going to be mule deer, and it's great deer habitat, but that's what lives there. So I just feel like that's kind of, if something limits me on that whole, like, just pick a spot on the map and go, it's that.
Yeah, I don't generally, like, maybe I said that wrong. I don't generally pick like a spot.
Yeah.
Some people will, decide, okay, I'm going to go hunt this state. And then they look at what public, and then they like look at the pinch points, and then they can almost identify the tree that they're going to set up in on Google. I don't go so far as to even pick the spot. I try and pick an area to start with, a general area, if that kind of makes sense.
Sure.
So if I pick a general area, then I'm not locked in, or I'm not locking myself into just this one piece or just this one, parcel of public. I'm locking myself into this area. And then if it's a statewide tag, and most zones in states are pretty big too, but if I'm wrong about my gut feeling about starting at this point, I'll just move. I mean, if I got to move 70 miles, that's 1 hour drive,
Yeah. So,
or if you drive 90, it's about 50 minutes.
yeah, right. So, one thing I watch all the teasers you guys put out and everything, and it just seems like y'all are always jumping out of a van or something, a car, and like going out and chasing some big buck, what percentage of time, for instance, in a morning, like in a morning, you have the opportunity to like ambush a deer, right? Like you can get out there before daylight and you can get somewhere in the path that a deer is going to travel from food to bed that day. And so like what percentage of the time do you feel like in the morning y'all are just driving, enjoying the heater for a second, watching, seeing what's moving around, and then making a play on it in the daylight, as opposed to like setting up in the dark and then moving from there possibly?
Yeah, generally over the last few years, I used to be the guy that got up really early, got out there, was in stand back more when I hunted out of tree stands and stuff. And I did it even when I hunted on the ground a bit, getting out there way before sunup, okay? And getting in my spot, whatever you want to call it. And there's still locations and situations where that is good to follow. Like for instance, we had a piece in Wisconsin. It wasn't that big of a piece of public, but it was there was one tiny little corner on the public, and it just, we stumbled onto it, and I was like, I don't think really anybody hunts this, and because basically you have to climb this huge hill, and then you have to go down this hill, and there's not a ton of acreage down at the bottom before you're running into private. And so I was like, and it was a fairly open woods. So from the top of the hill, and it was a big bluff. I mean, it wasn't that fun to climb, but from the top you could see pretty well down in there. So I was like, you know what? Most hunters probably aren't going down there just because they can see all the way down there. Okay. They can see all the way down there. I'm not going to go down there. I just hiked up this big hill, whatever. All right. So we go into this little corner and realize like this is a tiny little sliver where these deer were coming off a private, getting on the public for 200-300 yards, and then getting right back on private. And people, it was just a tiny little sliver. It wasn't something that you were going to like stalk and still hunt through. It was a setup situation. Right.
Right.
And basically that was a spot where, okay, we realized right away, like we need to be in this spot. It wasn't that far from a crop field that these deer would probably be coming from. We needed to be in that spot well before the sun came up, well before shooting light, just because those deer would already be starting to filter in there. And that did apply in that case. But a lot of times our process is I don't generally like to go in. If I'm like still hunting stalking method, I generally don't like to go in until when I can just barely start to see. Okay.
Gotcha.
That's generally what I like to do. And, depending on the situation, I'm not saying that always applies. If I got a good feeling, like, okay, let's just say it's late pre-rut or whatever, and I come to a new area and I'm surveying it, and a lot of times I'll look at and I'll road scout, I guess, if you will. I say I don't do any scouting, but obviously in the fall we're scouting as we're hunting all the time, right?
Yep.
Scoping things out. But a lot of times, a lot of times private fields are butting up to the public, and that's what those deer are using to feed on. So a lot of times I will scope out those private fields, and like, let's just say it's late pre-rut or whatever. or even into rut maybe a little bit. And let's say I see a decent amount of activity out in this field and they all came off a public, let's just say it was first light or whatnot. If I can get a general idea of where those deer are kind of maybe heading or predict it, the next morning I may very well get in there before the sun comes up and already be in position. And then if things go cold, let's say in the first half hour, 45 minutes or an hour, nothing is really cranking, then I'll maybe engage into a still hunt fashion where I'm going to slither through this piece of public, and maybe I'll find myself, in an opportunity with and it could be 500 yards away. Maybe I'll get into one, but I don't generally sit very long without seeing something before I decide I'm going to move.
Yeah.
So
cool, man. Yeah, no, I like that a lot, dude. That's interesting. We had I don't know. We had some similar experiences last year, and I think I don't know. It was we our last year was like one of our first years to really. I mean, I've shot a deer or two from the ground with a bow, but like last year we really got after it on the ground quite a bit, and you're definitely like hitting on a lot of things that I felt like we started to learn, as November kind of went on, I guess. So anyway, another question that kind of popped in my mind that I was like, what does your fall gas bill look like? It's got to be pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, it's up there. I don't actually itemize that and look at it as an item. I put the gas in, and I don't try and keep track of how much my gas bill was. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll probably scratch my head.
Yeah.
So, basically, what I like to do is, if I feel like I got to move or I feel like I got to cover ground in the vehicle, I just do it.
Yeah.
And I don't think too much about. Let's put it this way: if a tank of gas is $40, okay. And let's just say that you're hoteling it, for instance, or moteling it. Let's just say your motel is $60 a night. Well, if I feel like this spot's dead and I got to move 60 miles or 100 miles over here to get into maybe a better situation, I'm going to do that because it could, we could kill, and then I got a less expensive motel bill. So It's all how you factor it. I mean, for instance, some states also have a higher price on their license, but if it's a higher quality state, you might not have as much of a fuel bill or lodging bill.
That's complex.
Makes sense. That was how, like, I had a hunt in December last year where I was like, I shot a deer the first afternoon into this property from the ground, and I had kind of budgeted for like 3 days, and I was like, okay, I'm staying tonight, and I'm getting out of here the next day, and was able to, like you said, save on the hotel bill and everything else by kind of killing a deer real quick, So
right, and that's why I should probably shoot the first 120 that walks by.
right.
Last year, 15 minutes into the first rut hunt on the ground, I had about a nice 115, 128 point at 30 yards just looking at me. And, man, I'm not going to say I should have pulled the trigger, but things would have went a lot differently. I would not have eaten tag soup if that was the case, And it's just like, it's that allure or that fantasy that you talked about earlier of you just sit around this time of year and think about all these big bucks that are going to be running around out there. And sometimes you just look a gift horse in the mouth and you just don't take what's given to you.
Yeah. No, I've definitely been there before too. Like, get in there the first morning, first day. It's like, boom, you're into, 2.5-year-old deer or whatever. And you're like, wow, it's going to be like cranking. And then it's like 4 days later, you're like, is there a big buck around here anywhere?
They're all like 2.5 and 3.
What even happened to the 2.5-year-olds that we all saw the first 2 hours of the day? Like, where'd they all go?
No kidding, man. Yeah. So you guys, just to clarify for our listeners, I don't know if I've really, either of us have really made this statement, but you're like 100% from the ground, correct?
Correct. Yeah. This fall will be 10 seasons in a row. So this will be our 10th season of doing on the ground face to face.
It's awesome.
Like stalking, still hunting. that type of method.
So there's never a situation where you're like, man, if I'd have just had a stand.
There's definitely been spots and locations that I've came across that I was like, you know what? If I was a tree stand hunter, that would be a perfect spot for a tree. And I think that a hunter could have a good balance point. You know, I'm not saying that, you know, just strictly hunting on the ground is the best way to do it. I think that having a balance of both could potentially be the best of both worlds. For instance, like that piece that I was talking about, that little sliver, that little cranny of public in Wisconsin that I was talking about, that would have been a perfect case. Like, once we identified it, we're not still hunting this, we're not stalking this, these deer are just utilizing this little tiny corridor through the corner of the public. You know, that would have been a perfect case for a tree stand. And so there's definitely situations like that. On the flip side, I've also discovered hot pockets in the fall, you know, like showed up, boom, like, wow, this would be amazing if I put a tree stand right there. Like, we were covered up in good deer this morning or whatnot. And then the next morning we go back there and it's ice cold. And then I'm like, you know what? If I would have put a tree stand there, I would have milked the whole morning out. Let's jump in the car and go check out the next piece of public.
Yeah.
and we've actually gotten back on our feet and gotten on something by being aggressive like that, you know. So being on the ground just allows you to be a lot more adaptable to ever-changing situations, whether you're running into other hunters, whether a spot goes hot or cold. You're not lugging around a bunch of gear, and you know, it's not a big process. It's really easy for you to get in and out of places. So it's more easy for you to get busted on the ground and things like that too. But I mean, there's a compromise.
Sure.
There's pros and cons to both.
Let's talk about that some. You know, earlier you talked a lot about the whole knowing when to move and when to drive to different places and that kind of stuff. But I feel like for a hunter who's trying to transition maybe more to that on the ground style hunting, where you're doing some spot and stalk or some still hunting or whatnot, like, it's hard to be mobile. Like last year, we did a lot of stuff on the ground, but we still like grab tumbleweeds or whatever, or you know, some cedar trees or whatever it is, and kind of make a little ground blind, you know, and kind of have your like home base. But how do you know when like it's the time to not be attached to a certain location and to get out and, you know, make a move on a deer, or man, we need to be on that point, or we need to be at that saddle or whatnot?
Generally, I just go off of feel. I know that sounds silly. Everybody wants like a hard like way to be able to detect it, but really it goes off of feel, and it's the more experiences that you go through out there, the more accurate your judgment, your feeling gets. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, it might kind of make sense, maybe not. But,
no, it does totally, man. I mean, I feel like by the end of last year, I had like such a better grasp of just how deer use the landscape, right? And I would not have had that if I spent most of my time in a tree stand or in one specific location. Now, looking back, I was always, you know, 2 steps behind and didn't make the move until after, because I didn't feel tagged last year doing that. But no, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I feel like I like to consider myself an instinctive hunter, but I think to do that successfully, you have to really tap into your instincts and not second guess yourself too much. Like, you got to live and die by your choice. Right.
And when you realize that your choice was wrong, you end up like that ingrains into your instincts, and you know, as time goes on, I think your instincts become more accurate in their judgments because of those experiences, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
totally.
For sure, man.
So, I mean, you just got to get out there and do it. And I mean, even no matter how experienced you get at it, you know, we are humans and they are deer, and they're going to do unpredictable things at times, or things that you think that they're going to do this. No matter how much experience you get, you're going to end up, I mean, that's just the nature of the game. When you're playing with these deer on the ground like that, you're not always going to make the right decision. But one thing I have realized is when you're on the ground and you got an opportunity to close the distance on a mature deer, you need to not second guess yourself. Like, the first thing you think you need to do you need to do that and do it right now.
Yeah.
And not waste a whole bunch of time trying to evaluate the situation too much, because I've seen it many, many times, even in our own circumstances, where we second guess, we spend 5-10 minutes pitter-pattering around, throwing out possibilities like, well, maybe he'll do this, or what's he trying to predict what he's going to do, and or what, like, second guessing our first natural reaction to what we think. And then what ends up happening most of the time is he ends up doing exactly what we kind of thought.
Yeah.
Now we're too late. Now we're 5 minutes behind the ball, or sometimes it's 30 seconds behind the ball. That's cost us opportunities on good deer more than once because we sat there and we pitter-pattered around. And my general rule of thumb is, if I spot a big buck, whether I'm going to sneak in on him or try to get ahead of him, I move as fast as I possibly can. I move as fast as I possibly can to get there, if there's an opportunity to do so without him knowing. If that kind of makes sense. So, for instance, if I need to get 500 yards up here, and he can't see me or hear me, I'm gonna fly as fast as I can. And when I get close to where I need to be, I'm gonna I might end up slowing way down. And now I've just bought myself, because I hustled through that 300-400 yard dash or whatever, because I didn't waste a bunch of time. Now I've bought myself a little bit more time to ease into where I need to be. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know that sounds silly, but I've just seen it so many times where time wasted second guessing your gut reaction ends up costing you the opportunity.
Yeah, dude. 100% agree, man. Like I videoed a sheep hunt 2 years in a row in 16 and 17 in British Columbia. And the first trip was in August. It was an opener sheep hunt. And so it was August, or it was the last day in August, I guess. And so like it was a lot of leaves on the trees, and these sheep were like timber sheep, so we weren't able to see them that often. Well, it was like day 2 or 3 before we first even saw a sheep, and when we saw that there was a band of rams, I was like, let's go. And everybody there was like, we're like in no hurry at all, and so I definitely like correlate with your mentality there, but I think like, if there's guys that are listening that are kind of Western hunters, that's something it's an Eastern thing to kind of do that. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like the Western mentality is to sit there and wait and glass and see what happens and which way they're going to do this, and then you've got 9 more days to hunt, so you can do this. Whereas whitetail hunters, we're taking weekend trips, 3-day weekend trips and that kind of thing. It's got to happen now,
Right. And I mean, there's certain situations where putting the brakes on is a good decision, but every situation is different. But I'm saying, as a general rule of thumb, I don't do that,
Yeah.
But every situation is different. So if I got a big buck that is cooped up with a doe, and I get a feeling like, oh, they're getting, if their body language, everything about their demeanor senses that they're not going anywhere, and they look like they might be bedding down soon, well, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to wait, and I'm going to watch them until they bed, because then I'm going to have an exact pinpoint on where they're exactly at,
Yeah.
But if they're like on the move or headed somewhere, now that's a whole different deal. Now I need to get there like right now.
Right,
and I can't. So, I mean, it's hunting. So, I guess the one rule I do have in hunting is you can break every rule and still win in some situations. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, there's not a whole lot of rules that like I said, I mean, you can break every rules, and sometimes it's like, wow, I can't believe that actually worked. And then other times you can follow all the quote unquote rules, like don't do this, don't do that. And this should be a clockwork deal. And then it's like, wow, we didn't even come close on that deal. Is
there any, like, when you're talking about rules, is there any constants that you've learned about whitetail, like on the ground, that help you make those split-second decisions better? Like, this is just a hypothetical, okay? In the morning, bucks are going to probably have the wind coming, at a 45 degree over their shoulder off their tail or something like that, like whatever it might be. Like, are there certain little nuances like that you can key in on that help you make that choice right then?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. There's none that like necessarily pop over the top, like I'm not thinking of any like right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I'll do a lot of times is it's generally, not always, but a lot of times a big buck will bed and he's looking in a way where he can see what he can't smell.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't really, I don't think deer really like think like that. Like, oh, I got a bed like this. I think it's just instinct. They just do it.
Yeah.
Without thinking about it. I don't think they even bed with a conscious mindset of that's what they're doing. They just do that generally.
Yeah.
But I'd say more often than not, when I'm sneaking in on a bedded deer, I'm coming in like, it's not even crosswind a lot of times. A lot of times I'm barely keeping that wind just off of his nose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's if you have a very consistent wind direction, I'll do that. And it has cost me, like 2 opportunities off the top of my head where I was in bow range and that wind just switched for just a split second.
Yeah.
And the primary wind direction didn't kick back in time. And he caught my scent, or whatever. But a lot of times you have to come in my experience, on a bedded deer. A lot of those situations when they bed like that, a lot of times they're bedding comfortably. So they're looking directly downwind where they can't smell. So that means you need to be able to come in on a deer that can't see you. You almost need to be coming in a way that the wind is just off of their nose. Otherwise they have a lot better chance of detecting you through their eyesight, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And so that definitely applies. But I mean, I can't think of any, necessarily what you were kind of talking about there. I mean, there's some things that are constants, I think, with mature deer. But even like that, I've found deer, mature deer in situations where they don't bed like that. They'll be bedding, or they didn't that particular time, and maybe it's because the doe bedded in a way where she could smell, one's watching where they can't smell and the other's vice versa or whatnot. But, one strategy that I used years ago back when I started implementing, I still would use it today. I just haven't done as much like Wisconsin wooded terrain type stuff the last couple of years. But in like early October, one thing that we did there for a few years when we were doing a lot more Wisconsin stuff is we would go into these public areas in like early October, and we would just kind of like walk through the woods, so to speak, because it's generally speaking, it's not a great time to kill a big buck, and well, not unless you have a lot of knowledge based up about on a deer that's kind of there and everything like that. But when you're coming into it cold, ice cold, like we are, and don't know anything about, how good this piece is or what deer is there per se. A lot of times what we would do is we would walk through the woods, bump these does, and then not come back until like late pre-rut. But now we've identified where these doe pockets are, and now late October, pre-rut, late pre-rut, it's a great time to kind of start to hunt those fringes of those doe bedding areas. But that early October session of doing that allowed us to key in on several different, we'd have several different doe group bedding areas pinpointed on these different pieces of public.
So that would be like midday and walking against the wind, correct?
Yeah. You could do it midday, or you could do it, even a few hours before dark.
Yeah.
That generally, like in Wisconsin, at that time of the year, generally they're not like heading to the fields until like that last hour of light. So, we even implemented some bow drives during that period, which we never ended up killing anything, but we did identify a lot of, pockets and doe bedding areas, and even kicked out some good bucks in different cases where we came back late pre-rut, and those, because of what we learned in that early October session of doing that, that paid off for us, you know, in late pre-rut, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, dude.
So
that's cool, man. So, I mean, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I feel like it's kind of easier hunting from the ground in open country sometimes. But like, you know, we're talking about the woods now all of a sudden, and we live in pretty thick woods here in East Texas. How do you hunt that effectively from the ground, you know, outside of the tactic that you just explained in a different context?
Yeah, right. I think you can still be effective hunting on the ground in those scenarios, but depending on the situation, like how thick your cover is, you got to change things up. So for instance, my general rule of thumb when I'm hunting trees or, you know, brush, thicker vegetation, my general rule of thumb is don't move faster. Like it's kind of hard for me to explain this. I don't know why, but basically you have to move at a slow enough pace to where the noise that you're making, they can't hear you before you can see them.
Okay.
So
yeah.
If that kind of makes sense. So if it's thick cover and you can only see 30 yards, well, you're not going to sneak up on something if it can hear you 50 yards out, because it's going to be looking for you 20 yards before it can even see you. And does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And you have to.
It sounds stupid and it sounds silly, but that's, you know, you got to gauge. Okay, if it's a really windy day, you can get away with moving a little bit faster, a little bit quicker, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, but if it's a real quiet day, you might have to move at a snail's pace. You know, and here again, like, you know, if it's a new area, and I'm trying to just get a general overview of the area, I might move quicker than I would if I had that spot pre-qualified. And when I say pre-qualified, you know, like if I know it's got some good potential, like I've been in there before or whatever, or I've, you know, if I've been in there or I've gotten visuals on good deer, I'm probably going to move at a much slower pace. But if it's a brand new piece, I'm probably going to pick up my pace a little bit, because my whole general process is eliminating public acreage that's not worth your time.
Right.
And that's the key to, I think, or that's one of the main keys to being successful hunting public land, is you have to have a process that allows you to eliminate public acreage quick. And so in a new area or whatever, I'll probably move at a quicker gait. And if I end up bumping some deer or whatnot, and if I get a visual on a good deer, I might give it a day or two break and pop back in there. Or if it's rut, I might just put on the brakes, or I might come back in there the next morning or whatnot, because there's a good possibility, quite often, not always, but at that time of the year during the rut, where there's one, there's generally more. You know? You know, floating around there. So just because one deer knows, it's not like they dialed 1-800, you know, hey, stay the hell out of there, you know, to their buck buddies, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, God, I had something right on the tip of my tongue right before I got talking about that too, but now I'm drawing a blank.
It's the price of cracking a joke, man. It's the price you pay. So, okay, so if you think of it, feel free to stop at any time, but I kind of want to move into the decoys and just kind of like get your overall theory on how you guys are using decoys.
You know, the decoy, it's a great tool to have in your arsenal. So what I mean by that is a grunt tube can be a great tool. A rattle antlers can be a great tool. You know, all those things that we use for hunting can be a great tool, but it's not always the right tool. So for instance, if we're doing some rattle set, we've utilized the decoy for rattle sets, and it's worked out kind of nice for some of that stuff. Okay. Where it's quick and easy to get in and out of without dragging a decoy through the brush or whatnot. I generally don't like to have the decoy with me if I'm trying to like still hunt through a woods or whatever, because it ends up being a big cluster.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But now let's just say that you have a situation where you're like, okay, I got a visual on this big buck. How do I use a decoy? The first thing, I don't like to bring presence to my being in the area at all until I'm like inside of comfort zone, which generally means for a compound shooter, you're pretty much in range of that animal before you even let them know, like, hey, there's a decoy there.
Yeah.
If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Like in that one video we've got, you see this big buck, and Shay was running up to this big buck with this decoy. And it's like, whoa, you can just run at him with a decoy. Well, no, you can't really do that. It just worked out that time because his doe was in the weeds, couldn't see the operation, and the big buck, and I've seen this with mature deer a lot of times. A lot of times mature deer do not make like eye contact or acknowledge. They don't even acknowledge a lot of times, in my opinion, of what I've seen. They don't even acknowledge younger bucks. I'm talking about an older mature deer generally doesn't even allow or acknowledge that younger deer, that other buck, until they're like close. Okay. They pretend like they don't exist.
Yeah.
It's like a demeaning thing, like, or whatever. That's
yeah.
the way. And it's probably just because they've been down the road so many times. They're just like, yeah, whatever. When he gets here, I'll deal with it,
Mm-hmm.
And so like with that big mature deer, he had his attention on that doe, and I think he was trying to determine, like, oh, does she see this other buck coming in, and how she, like, is she going to trade me in for him or not, or what? I mean, there's a lot probably running through his head, but he didn't actually make eye contact with that decoy when it was moving to him the entire time until, the decoy was stopped. So, I mean, basically, if he would have looked over when we were running at him, or when Shay was running at him, if he would have looked over, he probably would have been like, what the heck is that?
Mm-hmm.
Like something's not right there. So there's times where it's a great tool to use, but there's also times where if you use it too quick, it can cost you the opportunity, because all of a sudden now you've got the buck and the doe's attention, and they're like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
Something doesn't look right there or whatever. So I'm more gun shy. I'm more cautious of using it more the last few years, just because it can jeopardize your, it's a tool. So, I mean,
Yeah.
It's not like, it's like sometimes there's a time to snort wheeze or a time to grunt, and other times it could end up not working good. It could end up being a bad thing for you.
Right.
And the same can be applied to the decoy. So,
is there ever a time that, let me back up. Do you always use a small buck, or are you using a doe sometimes, depending on the situation?
I haven't ever used a doe.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that that's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't use a doe by any means. I'm just saying that I haven't ever used a doe, which, that probably has some advantages in some situations too. I mean, you got a cruising buck, it's rut. If you can pop a doe decoy out or whatever, maybe get his attention. The thing about it is, a mature deer would probably come in to investigate another, like the difference between a buck decoy and a doe decoy at a long distance, like say 200 yards, 300 yards, 400 yards. He's probably going to come, if he's cruising and he's a mature deer, he would probably come in to investigate, maybe not, but he would probably come in to investigate the situation, whether it's a buck decoy or a doe decoy.
Right. Yeah.
That would be my general thoughts on it. But, now if I used the doe decoy and got some experiences that would prove that otherwise, obviously I would say, well, I was wrong in that, statement. But that would be my general thought process on it.
Yeah. So last year we got into a situation where we were on the ground and we were stalking, we had seen two bucks, and they were kind of acting weird. They weren't really reacting. We tried to give them some grunt calls as they were kind of heading away. They were several hundred yards, and then long story short, we end up stalking into these bucks and figure out that they're with does, and like all the does get out of there except one is kind of in lockdown with this more mature buck. And both these bucks are about the same size, but one of them was just dominant, I guess. And we got caught several times moving in on these bucks on the ground, but we stuck the decoy up, and like 15 minutes later, everybody would go back to bedding down and calm and everything. Like, do you ever use it as like that where you're stalking in and it's like, oh crap, I got seen, so I'm going to stick this decoy up real quick and it covers me?
Yeah, we've used that a couple of times, but generally, I mean, sometimes that works. I think it's okay. Let's put it this way. I think that works perfectly if you have a situation where they haven't determined that you're a human.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you can somehow get away with throwing the decoy up maybe when they glance away for a second or whatnot. I mean, they're animals. So, I mean, every animal and every situation is different. I mean, I've had whitetails do things that I'm like, is this somebody's pet?
Yeah.
And then it's like later that day or the next day on the same piece or whatever, you could have a deer that tolerates absolutely nothing, and it's like, whoa, what the heck was that?
Yeah.
It's like my buddy John. He was turkey hunting in Pennsylvania. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and he sent me this video, and this hen turkey came in, and she was, I don't know, 10 yards maybe away from him, and he was sitting there cackling at her, and he was like, like as he was, yelping with his turkey call or whatever, he was like moving his hands as if he was like puppet talking to it. Supposedly he said it hung out there for like an hour and a half. It's like, I was like, this is a wild turkey. It's looking at him. It doesn't seem nervous at all. It was like, okay, it totally identified him as being a human, but just not as a human threat. And for whatever reason, that turkey was comfortable. And I think the same thing occasionally applies to whitetails. One thing that I have found is this happens very regularly on the ground is you do, especially when you're filming and you have a second guy there and he's got a big camera and he's, it's quite often that you do get pegged by deer that is like, what the heck is that? And one thing that I found with deer is oftentimes, as long as you don't move, you can trick them into thinking that you're nothing at all.
Yeah.
So my general rule of thumb is when they lock up and they're like V-line pointed, looking right at you, it looks like they're staring holes through you.
Oh.
If they haven't bolted, they haven't determined that you're a human or that you're a threat. It's just a possibility in their mind, right?
Dude,
so as long
talk about your legs going to sleep, though, man.
Oh my goodness,
it's the worst.
Exactly. Literally, when they lock up like that, I usually figure it's going to be 5 to 15 minutes, depending on the situation, the deer, and everything.
Yeah.
It's going to be 5 to 15 minutes of locked up, not moving, to be able to convince this thing, because every single time, they're gonna stare at you for a few minutes, and then every single time they're gonna drop their head, and then snap their head up, or depending on the deer, I've seen deer be very creative about this, where they'll drop their head below, like where there could be a tree trunk in their way. They can't see you at all, but then they'll just hang out there for a few seconds and they'll snap up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they purposely move their head into a position where you wouldn't be able to see them to make eye contact, and then they're peekabooing you. Yeah. But if the first time that they do that, that's my first clue that they haven't determined that I'm a human. And as long as I move, I'm in pretty good shape right now, as far as them calming down and just going about their business.
What about disappearing when they do that? Are you better to just stay still, or if like you have a chance, like when they drop their head, to just hit the dirt and then you're gone?
No,
does it wig them out?
No, you're better off. Yeah, you're better off to just stay frozen.
Yeah,
you're better off to stay frozen until you believe that they are completely convinced that you're nothing at all and they've went about their business.
Yeah,
and then because if that happens, generally they might move 5-10 yards, and then they might like all of a sudden be like, hey, I better check that out again. And then if they look and you're gone, now they've changed their perspective on you, from where they were. They've moved 5-10 yards or whatever, and now they could be like, oh, whatever. But if you do that in the heat of the battle, like if they turn and look away and all of a sudden you drop down like that, well, it's just like you. If you were out there and you're like, what the heck is that blob? And then all of a sudden it was gone, you would know it was something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, where did that thing go?
Yeah.
So you're better off just, in my opinion, you're better off just to trick them as you're just some object that the farmer put out there,
Right.
or the DNR put something out there, or whatever. You know, obviously
Right.
they're not going to think about it that deep, but
Yeah. Well, so real quick, just for clarity, before we move on from the decoy stuff, what is your ideal decoy situation? Like, when do you go, okay, this is when I want to use this thing because I've seen it work like this before?
Okay. Ideal situation is a buck locked on a doe, and they're in enough cover that I can get close to break the comfort zone. And when I say break the comfort zone, I mean that zone, that perimeter zone that, you know, if you pop that buck decoy up and he acknowledges it, he sees it, you're within that comfort zone to where he's going to come to get you out of there.
Yeah.
So, if that kind of makes sense.
And so you feel like that's like what percentage of the time does that work if you get within that range?
Pretty much, generally speaking, almost always.
Yeah.
Not always, but generally speaking. But if it doesn't work, now you got your hands full because you've just drawn a lot of attention to your whole situation.
Yeah.
And that's a very fine line because, like, let's say you pop that decoy up at 100 yards, well, you've just screwed yourself.
Yeah.
Because he's not going to break away from his doe because you're not really infiltrating his perimeter enough to pose a real threat to him. You're just a possible threat at this point. And so he's not going to now but now what's going to happen is he's going to have his eyes on you almost all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and he's going to have his attention in your direction all the time. So it makes it very difficult for you to ditch the decoy and choose a different method. And it makes it very difficult to move with that decoy then at that point.
Okay.
Almost impossible.
So just for argument's sake, say within comfort zone is within range, what is the point of deploying the decoy as opposed to just sitting there and waiting on a shot?
To be honest with you, I mean, it's funny you bring that up because I would say that the only advantage that you really have in that situation is if it's fairly open ground, you've just kind of made a blind, if you would say.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds silly, but you know, because outside of that, I mean, by sticking that decoy up, now you've, you know, basically captured their full attention once they know that you're there, once they see. So now you've created their, you know, you've captured their entire attention into this specific area that you're trying to, you know, that you're right in that area too, because you're right behind that decoy, you know. So if the situation has enough cover or whatever to where you don't need that decoy, now when he stands up, his attention is 360 degrees. It's not this little tiny, you know, 2-degree sliver where this decoy exists and you're trying to stay hidden behind it. So I guess to answer your question, you're absolutely right. Like, it's, you know, it doesn't have a whole lot of advantages to the situation at that point, other than it's a blind. And I guess the other advantage would be if you're inside of that perimeter range, he's probably going to come to charge you.
Ooh. So then you're starting to get into it's not an advantage.
Which could land you in a hospital.
Yeah.
But I mean, well worth it though.
That's a good story. Yeah,
exactly.
That's the thing. Like, sometimes we got to forget advantages and just, you know, realize that we're there for an experience and it's fun to get a buck mad, right? Like, how cool is that he's like coming at you?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You know, I haven't ended up with like a G2 tine stuck through my rib cage yet. But I can tell you this, I think that with the strength of a whitetail, if he would decide to charge you, I mean, that's going to be a bad deal. Like, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to advocate anybody goes and gets charged and mauled by a deer. Because, you know, like a decent sized rack, you know, like an 8-pointer. You take like a mature 8-pointer and he comes in and charges you, the G2 tine is going to shove right through your rib cage in 2 seconds.
Oh yeah.
You know, like it ain't going to feel like it was anything probably, you know? So, you know, and they are whitetails. So most of the time if you shoot, generally speaking, they're going to be frightened by it. They're going to run from it. But then you could end up, I mean, just like we were talking about with like, their animals. Like, why did that turkey hang out with John for an hour and a half right there? He posed, like it thought it was he was his buddy or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Well, on the flip side, you could have an animal that says, that realizes what you are and just, is just, that's the way he is. Like, I'm going to kill you now. And, comes charging in, you know what I mean? Like, they're animals. So you don't know. They can be unpredictable like that. I mean, I haven't seen that happen yet, but I don't have 100 situations under my belt to say, all 100 of those didn't go that direction, and 100, I would say that, if I had 100 under my belt, there'd probably be one that I'd be like, yeah, that one went south.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready for that DVD to come out, man. So.
Well, yeah, right. But I mean, truthfully, I mean, they're not like you watch some of those videos when you got 2 bucks locked up and the one's already dead.
Yeah.
Or close to. I mean, they have a lot of life and they have a lot of strength built up in them, even when they've been tired down that much. So you just think about, to put things into perspective. You think about like, okay, now you've just infiltrated his perimeter. He's fully healthy and rested up, and you've just pissed him off, because he's locked up with his woman there, and now you've just pissed him off, and he's full tilt. Like, that's a bad place to be. Like, if that happens, I'm not saying, like, obviously I'll put myself in that situation. I'm just not advocating anybody else to necessarily do that.
Right. Yeah.
Because that could be bad.
Do you ever shoot them in their bed?
I haven't yet, but Chancey, in the last video, Chancey shot both of his big bucks in the bed.
Yeah.
In the last bow video. Now, for a long time, I didn't really, I wasn't like really fond of the idea of that, but more in recent years, like for instance, I had a buck, the same season Chancey killed them 2 in his bed. I had a buck that I snuck up on. And I was going to shoot him in his bed because I determined that with our set, it was going to be a lot better possibility. Like it was going to be a lot less risky of a shot if I shot him in his bed versus wait for him to stand. Like I knew that the second he stood, he was going to peg us, and then it was going to be a crapshoot from there on out. Right. So, I think as far as whether it's a good situation for a kill versus wounding them, I think that when you're hunting deer on the ground like that, I feel like there's less likelihood of things to go wrong if you shoot them in their bed. Uh-huh. And that's in a lot of those situations, not necessarily every situation.
That's how I felt too, man. I mean, I feel like, as long as you aim at the right spot, which, is kind of a question, my next question, like, how do you make that shot go the way you want it to?
Yeah, right. You got to picture their vitals as like, say, a basketball, right? And so, or about that size, right?
Right.
So what I try to do is I try to forget about anything bone related and just picture where their vitals are. And then I shoot right there. Mm-hmm. And if you're shooting a good enough arrow setup and a good enough broadhead setup, then that's not a problem. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you're shooting a really light arrow setup and 100 grain expandable head up front, you hit the front main shoulder bone, you might have some real problems. Yeah.
And you've been living the trad life since before it was cool, right? So like, I'm sure that's kind of like your
7 years.
7 years.
Trad 7 years.
Yeah, you made it cool then.
Yeah,
it's always been cool. What are you talking about?
So, are you rocking upwards of close to 600 grains, or like what's your arrow setup for that kind of thing?
Yeah. I shoot 660 grains.
Woo, man, you're chunking logs.
You shoot through grass and stuff too, right?
Yeah. I shoot 278 grains up front.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So when that thing hits, it hits hard, and then I'll only shoot a 2-blade head.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
A lot of people don't understand this, I don't think, but they call it a 2-blade head, but it's really a 1-blade head. Okay.
Right.
And what I mean by that is is you're making one insertion in one direction. You know, you've got a blade on each side, but it's only a slit, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But you take a 3-blade head now that is truly a 3-blade. It's cutting in 3 different directions. So to my knowledge, you know, like, just because you break bone doesn't mean that you kill anything. Nothing's ever died of a broken bone except for a long, you know, maybe over a 2-year period, this animal dies because it broke its leg or whatever, right? Okay. So I don't want to shoot a 3-blade head out of like a traditional setup, because if I hit main bone, it's not gonna penetrate through bone nearly as good as a 2-blade, what I would call a 1-blade head, because you've got to break it in 3 different directions versus a 2-blade head. I say a 1-blade head because nobody's ever called it that I'm aware of, but you're only cutting in one direction.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you don't have to force the bone break in 3 different separate directions.
Right.
No, it makes sense.
So what that makes is it makes it need way less force to be able to get through the bone to get to the goods where the vitals actually exist.
Yeah.
So
So
you know, there are a couple of really good 3-blade heads out there for a 3-blade setup. Like if I were to shoot a 3-blade setup, I would shoot like a Woodsman, I'd take a strong look at the Woodsman, or like the G5 Montec. That's another famously good 3-blade head. I'm not saying 3-blade heads are bad or anything, but 3-blade heads will not penetrate as good as a 2-blade head. Period.
Yeah.
Like, their physics can't allow it to do it. You know, it's just not possible. Can they penetrate great? Yeah, sure. I mean, they've killed a lot of game, and out of the right setup they can. But like I'm shooting traditional, and I'm shooting a heavy arrow and everything like that, and I don't want to think about like. So when I get face to face with a whitetail, my favorite shot is head on.
Yeah.
I love face to face shots. They're extremely lethal. You have a little bit smaller kill area, but you have a lot less that can go wrong.
Yeah.
On the ground, my least favorite shot angle is a broadside. And a lot of people would call me crazy, but you got a little bit bigger kill area, but a lot can go wrong with that. They can take a step, they can drop, they can do a lot of things that a deer that's facing you can't do. Well, I mean, it can't get out of the way of the arrow in time or react enough, and a deer generally will drop a lot more of its front body than its rear in the same amount of time. Right. So if you watch videos, from what I've seen anyways, I shouldn't say a ton more, but their front cavity of the deer drops further than their rear. So if you shoot a good penetrating setup on a head-on shot, and that arrow goes all the way in the deer, it might be high on the entrance, but by the time it gets back to the back of the lungs area, you might be in the middle of the lungs. Yeah. But height-wise, Right. But on broadside, you only got one chance. You can hit that dead pocket, you're done. Yeah. You're not deer, you know, or vice versa low. So, my second favorite shot is a 1/4 shot. And that doesn't, like those are my favorite shots, whether I'm shooting traditional or compound, but here again, I'm shooting a heavy arrow, good penetrating setup, a lot of weight up front, 2-blade head. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, going kind of back to the decoy thing, I guess one of the other advantages is that you kind of get presented with your favorite shot a little bit more because that deer's coming right at you.
You do. Correct. Yeah. Correct. A lot of times it ends up being like a 1/4 shot. Yeah. Just because they're kind of like rounding generally. Yeah. Like with the shape of our decoy, for instance, generally you end up with like a 1/4. But I really like 1/4. Some people don't like 1/4. Generally speaking, the people that don't like 1/4 are shooting from elevated tree stand positions, and they're generally shooting light arrows with expandable heads. Yeah, sure. Okay? Yeah. And when I say that my favorite shot is a head-on shot and a 1/4 shot is my second favorite, I'm talking from ground level. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying – because that's completely different. When you're shooting from elevated, that changes everything. Yeah. Yeah.
So where are you shooting in that 1/4? What are you aiming at there?
It depends on how far they're quartering, but generally I'll aim like right on the shoulder, right in front. Generally, not always. I mean, it just depends on how much they're angled. How much they're quartered, and then
So I mean, you're not afraid of that bone, right there.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I like to be like, let's just say that a deer is is 45 degrees to you, 1/4 right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to put it just in front of his front shoulder. That's where I want to hit. You know, the last thing I want to do is bounce it, like have my arrow hit the side and kind of like slide off and down behind, and now it slides. You know what I mean? Now it changes the whole direction of my arrow by hitting that at that. You know, because if you're shooting at a deer at that angle or whatever, it might be really easy to torque that arrow to where it almost starts to run parallel to him, and now you never even hardly get in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that kind of makes sense. But here again, like the heads I shoot are 2-blade cut on contact, so when they hit bone, they have a lot better chance of starting to penetrate that bone, which will cause them to have less likelihood, in my opinion, of a deflected flight, or a deflected, not flight, but a deflected change of direction, as it hits that animal or it hits that bone. I mean, some people have had that happen, and some people have had it happen, I know, with 2-blade heads too, where you hit bone and all of a sudden your arrow changes and heads a different direction and not a direction that you wanted it to do. But it can happen.
What head is that?
I shoot, right now I'm shooting, it's made by Alaska Bow Hunting Supply. It's a grizzly stick. It's called the Samurai.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's the head that I shoot. So I shoot a 200 grain, and then I shoot 128 grains of brass insert. It's a weight, and then I put weights behind the insert. So to get my 278 grains up front, that's what I do.
Yeah. What did it take to get proficient with that, man, as far as practice goes?
It takes a little while right at first, or it can. Everybody's different. It's kind of like, I know it sounds a little cliche to say it, but it's kind of like throwing a football. Some people pick up a football and they can throw it great right away or whatever, or could. And then other people, they might struggle with it a little bit longer, or riding a bike or anything like that. I mean, it's an instinctual type shooting method. Therefore, some people are going to pick it up quicker than others. And some of that comes down to having the right bow set up and all of that too. I haven't been able to shoot as much the last few years because I've had a few different injuries that I just have been really kind of taking it easy so I don't injure myself further down the road, if you will. But I know it won't take me long, even though I haven't shot much. It won't take me long to kind of get back into the rhythm, just because I did do a ton of shooting, like when I got rolling, and for those first 3-4 years, I did a lot of shooting. So, so the more you do it, the more you can pick it up, even if you haven't done it for a while. And it generally only takes a few sessions, and you can be getting pretty dialed back in to where you were. And I'm not talking about shooting aspirin. I'm just talking about shooting, fairly proficient. I'm no aspirin shooter, but I'm, fairly proficient.
Yeah. That's good, man. Man, that's a great place to wrap this thing up. I think, man, we've pretty much covered everything under the sun, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. This has been one of my favorite podcasts, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, dude. So for the listener that wants to see just giant public land deer getting encountered so hard, how do they get in touch with you? How do they connect with you?
We've got a website. It's whitetailadrenaline.com, and then our social media is Whitetail Adrenaline on Instagram and Facebook. Although we aren't the best at the social media world right now. So we'll be getting that, I think, back under control here. It's just my time gets ate up a lot with going through all the content, editing, producing the next stuff. So I haven't been as active with that, but that's how they find us.
And y'all approach the so-called industry a little bit different than everybody else does, right? So your take on sponsorships and stuff is a touch different. Yeah.
We haven't done any sponsorships ever for the company, so that does require people to actually have to purchase the production, the video. Yeah. But that allows us to have basically what I feel is a more authentic, raw type production of hunting, and I feel like it's produced at a fairly high level too.
Yeah. Man.
As far as I think it would hold its candle, fairly decent, if it were, put on the major networks or whatever in the hunting industry, I think it would hold its candle very well in that regard. But it is something that people have to purchase. That's how we fund it, is through selling the apparel and then the videos. But that allows us, or has allowed us, to be able to keep it unfiltered, unsponsored, which eliminates all the advertising and all of that sort of thing. So they just basically get kind of like this raw, organic, authentically captured hunting production.
Yeah, man, that's cool.
It's awesome, dude. Yeah.
It's different. It's a grind either way.
Right.
It's not an easy gig whether you do sponsors or not sponsors.
Yeah.
So it's no walk in the park.
Well, we'll link to that stuff in our show notes here for the listener. And if you're a listener, don't be cheap. Go buy a DVD. Because they're awesome, man.
Hey, we're hoping this year to have our download option available with these next ones.
Yes.
Oh, nice, dude.
Yeah, dude.
That's been something that we've wanted to hit the last 3 years, but we just we've had some concerns with how to do that and keep it protected, because obviously we don't fund it through sponsors, so
right.
we can't have it getting pirated and easily accessible for people to just share. It's not free to produce.
Yeah, sure.
This is America, we got to put food on the table. But,
it's America. That's right.
Yeah, right. So this ain't the YMCA. This year I think we're in a pretty good position to be able to make that happen. We think that we've figured out how to do that. So, like I say, we're on schedule right now to have the new videos out the first week of August, and along with that, I think there's a very good likelihood that we're going to have it available as well for download, digital copy, which one thing that is really cool about that is if it's this year, that's going to be awesome. Whenever that comes, though, we've been producing everything in 4K quality for the last 3 seasons. But our DVDs are standard def, so everybody's always watched it in standard def, so they're going to take a huge jump. I mean, the difference between standard def and 4K is 24 times the resolution. So we've been producing everything in 4K for 3 seasons now, and yet we've only outputted the standard def at the end. So when you're watching DVD, that's standard def. I mean, it looks good in standard def, I think, but wait till they see it in 4K.
So your house is full of storage then, if you're producing this in 4K.
We spend about $10,000 a year in storage.
Golly, man, that's insane.
Well, $8,000, $8,500.
Yeah. Don't exaggerate too much now.
Hey, and we even cheat. We don't even use like the high end 4K codecs.
Nice.
Like we're using like the ones that compress the file a lot more.
Yeah.
Which isn't ideal, but it still produces a pretty good image.
Oh, sure, dude. Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I cannot wait for August to come around, man, so we can see some of that stuff. And man, like I said, for our listeners, y'all support real people doing real things, and don't be cheap on that end. You know what I mean? Like if it's something else, and I understand you've been doing a little pirating, but this dude's a real dude, so go do it. So anyway, Jared, thanks so much, man. This was awesome, and I'm sure we'll get back in touch with us sometime and talk some more tactics when we can come up with more questions.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
sure
dude.
thing, man.
All right. The goal is in stone. The plan is in sand.
Man, how good is that? Dude just
so
dropped
good.
one of the best lines.
I've never heard it. It's not a cliche.
No, it's not.
I love that when that happens.
Oh, my goch.
Like when it's good and it's not
Maybe
a cliche.
like, what if our Wisconsin listeners are like, dude, we hear that every day. Just because we're from Texas. I don't know. Yeah. It's cool, man. I'm going to use it this season for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's going to be a thing.
Let's do it, man.
I like it.
Let's make it our motto.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks for the motto.
Dude, the whole time in that interview, I'm playing back sequences from this past season.
Yep.
The whole time. Like, I am paying attention 100%, but I'm, like, so in tune with what he's saying. Like, I'm overlaying his tactic and what he's talking about to things that I did wrong in the field. And I'm thinking, man, like, I cannot tell you. The picture is in 8K, okay, of exactly how I shot that deer that got scared by the metal lock.
I hope you have enough storage up there.
Oh, dude, it's a lot. It's like 6 terabytes right there worth. But I'm serious, man. Like, you know how like you envision like the way things are going to happen. Like you've talked about this before with football stuff. Like you envision the play before it happens. Mm-hmm. I had so much time on that stalk to envision the play. Like it is, I know which hair I was aiming at when that deer stood up. Like it was all there, and then it just didn't happen. It was just like, you know, just like a vapor and gone. It was like it's so crazy, man. And to look back, especially when he's talking about the way the deer bed, that's how that buck was.
Yeah.
And I had a just off wind, and I guarantee you, if his nose was where his butt was, he could have smelled me.
Yeah,
at some point in time.
I mean, that's what I think we talked about it the episode after we did that. But like that's where I was like giving you these signals, like micromanaging. I was like, I can feel the wind. I know the direction, and I know where he needs to be. But he's also got to stay out of the sight of that peripheral side of that buck, you know. And
that's the other thing. I think that we need to just have more experiences doing that, which I'm game for.
Well, I mean, Jared, they're doing it, and they've been doing it for a long time, and he's making fun of the fact that like they don't kill a whole lot of deer.
Out
of all the ones they stalk. You know?
Sure, man. And I think that's you just got to have more targets.
Yeah.
And the one thing I really want to get figured out is like in that buck specifically, we're going to do the whole like you hold the decoy up and him concentrate on you, right?
Yep.
Where could I get away with being? And how like tunnel visioned is he at that moment? Like, can I be like in his peripherals, but he's not paying attention because there's a decoy out there?
Yeah.
Or do I have to be directly back of his head to get away with it? You know?
Man, I don't know for sure, but I think there's like at least 200 degrees that you can't be in.
Oh, at least.
At least.
I'm going to say more like 270, but I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 270. Yeah. I mean, it's you'd have to be almost behind him, I think.
Yeah. And that's where I was. It was
at that distance. But at the same time, like if he doesn't catch you until you've drawn, and it's you're at that 250 degree mark or whatever, and you're inside of that or whatever, and so he catches you drawing, but he's already been focused on this decoy. All of a sudden, there's a lot of confusion that probably enters his brain at that moment. You know what I mean? And instead of bolting immediately, he might be really like trying to decipher, like turn his head, what was that? But then I'm still thinking about this over here. You know what I mean? And then that gives you enough time. That's just like that's your second and a half or two to draw a bead and make the shot. You know?
Sure. Well, in the situation, how it played out, he probably didn't realize that was a bird that made that noise and got up and saw me and was like, ah!
Yeah.
You know, and in the situation that we were going to try to play out, he would have saw a deer, that's the decoy, and then if he happens to see me, deer's going to be on his brain.
Yeah,
he's going to think
point.
I'm a deer probably for a split second, long enough for me to squeeze off, right?
Yeah,
but
a good point.
all the things that are going, and like he was talking about, Jared shoots through grass. One of my big concerns was that when that deer stands up, he's not actually going to break the plane of the grass because that was after I had hit grass shooting at another buck. So the grass was like real on my mind, right? And like one of my big things is I was trying to get close enough to where when he stood up, I was going to be able to shoot his vitals without having any interference of junk. And that all happened in like 20 seconds.
Yeah. So back to that where you hit grass and that miss, was that, were you shooting a fixed blade there?
Nah. I was shooting an expandable. Yeah. And I don't know, man, like out there in that wind, it's going to be... Here's the thing. You have to have a bow that's perfectly tuned to be able to shoot a fixed blade head at good distance, right? That deer was 35-ish. That's kind of the max range on shooting a bow that's not like perfectly tuned. With the stalking and stuff that we do, throwing bows through stuff, I'm just going to say that it gets out of tune. And I'm going to say that in intense situations like that, it's going to be a little bit torqued or something's going to be a little bit off. And I still like the gamble of shooting a mechanical for the wind drag and for just the either the torque or the tune of the bow situation.
Those are good points.
So I don't know, and there's a good chance that a fixed blade did just as much junk as what that arrow did too.
Yeah.
I don't know if it hung we never found the arrow, so we don't know if it deployed the head or what. Right. But I do think that, I actually had fixed blades in my quiver whenever that happened. And I think that if we did happen to decoy not not elk, whitetail. Elk's really on my mind a lot.
Yeah.
If we did happen to decoy a whitetail straight in, and like we're planning on doing the decoy thing, I'd probably run a fixed.
Yeah.
At 15 yards, I'm going to send some cold steel through him,
Right.
and like it's going to get done. I don't know. It's just kind of my thoughts.
No, I agree with you. Like, and I don't agree with you. Like this knowledge that you're spitting right now is something that like I haven't really thought, but now that you're saying it,
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I can agree with you on this. And I've been struggling with it too. Like, what broadheads should I shoot? Like, so many guys are talking about shooting these fixed blades, these 2 blades, John Lusk, has a big broadhead guy. Like, man, I don't know, but I just know what has worked for me. But I do know that I hunted a lot more on the ground too last year. But I did shoot a deer on the ground at 40 yards with a mechanical last year and killed him.
And your bow may have been a little bit torqued because you had to do a crunch while drawn.
Dude, that was a point I was going to make. Is that I got my bow tuned like right before the season. And dude, it was so inconsistent during the whole season last year. Like, I just could not pull it all together, and I'm just sitting here frustrated. Like, I know I can shoot better than this. It's got to be out of tune, And how it is during season, man. It's hard to, like, your spare time is hunting. It's not going to the bow shop, usually. So,
especially when your bow shop guy goes to a state for
underground.
2 weeks. Yeah,
yeah, that too. Yeah. So anyway, I like that. I'm sure, and who knows, but moving around, carrying the bow through Greenbrier on Texas Public so much, like.
Oh, you've
miles
seen
and
me. I
miles.
knock stuff out of the way with my bow. I'm mean to my bow.
Yeah,
like it's just, it's a tool. Use it, right? And I just don't think that in a real world hunting scenario, from the ground, you're going to be able to take out all of those like extra additives and make a bow execute a perfect shot. I'm going to try to do the things I can to make up for that. Yeah. Now, in Jared's situation with trad bow, it's a lot different.
Yeah,
it's going a lot slower, and he's got a lot more weight up front. And if he's got a little torque on the arrow, so what? He's got 5-inch feathers on the back. It's gonna work it all out by the time he gets there, too.
Yeah.
But
which is probably why he shoots a trad bow.
That's a great from the ground thing. You can't
shoot
tear it up.
and I appreciate. I appreciate the ability to like be able to shoot a compound and to practice. I'll practice this summer. I will, and I'll practice a little bit during the season and stuff. But like, once October hits, there's only a few sessions of practice that I get throughout the season. It's just to make sure everything's still on before I hunt usually, you know? So it's just like, I appreciate not having to just constantly work that out in a traditional bow setup, know? And I can't shoot one very well. Or at least mine, I haven't ever.
So, I shoot that. I don't hunt with it, but I shoot one a lot, practicing or whatever, just having fun because it's just kind of fun to fling arrows or whatever with one. But I can't tune one. I don't know how to do that well, and I don't have enough funding to buy all the arrows I think it takes to make that happen. And arrow saw, like, it's a big deal, right? And my bow shop guy doesn't know much about them, so you kind of just, like, stuck there at that point in time. I can, with field points, like, I feel pretty good out 40, 45 yards.
Right.
I'm hitting, my Reinhardt 16-1 or whatever at 45 yards every time. You strap broadheads on there, it's a different game, dude. And it's the same scenario that we're talking about with the fixed versus mechanical in our compounds. It's the whole, like, there are other things playing in there once you start strapping bigger pieces of stuff on the front of the arrow, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And this year I have a new bow, thanks to our friend Cody, and
I got it on trail camera.
A new what?
I've got Cody on trail camera.
Do you?
I had a camera on my property. Yeah. And I was like, who is this person pulling in my driveway? And then I zoomed in, and it's got a little Matthew sticker on the back of the truck. And I said, that's Cody.
Yeah. So I got a new bow thanks to him. It's not brand new, but it's new to me, and I shot it, and it's so much better than my bow. I can tell.
It's going to be nice, man.
And I think adding a little speed and that kind of thing is going to allow me to shoot. Just to shoot, I guess, to not worry so much about like shooting a 3-blade mechanical or something like that, So
it's good.
Anyway, I'm excited about that, and hopefully it shot really good too. Like as far as like seemed like it was a pretty good tune, So I was excited about that.
That's good, man. Well, I can't wait to to actually get to fling some arrows at some stuff, dude. This season's going to be pretty crazy.
It's going to come up quick, man.
I know. Talking to Jared, I'm like, I've been real hype about elk, right?
Yeah.
But, like, I got a little bit hype about whitetail this morning.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it the last few days. Whitetail.
And, man, I cannot wait to get out there and do. I just love the, like, run and gun whitetail stuff, man.
Yeah.
It is fun. It is a
fun.
fun time, dude, to, like, just only have 30 minutes at a fast food restaurant to catch your breath and just carb up, and then you're back at it, dude.
Yeah.
It is just fun.
I know it is, man, and I'm excited. Like I feel like this is my year. Like I'm going to shoot a deer on Texas Public.
It is. It's your year.
Like I think
it is coming, and it's going to be a big one, a big daddy.
I hope so, dude. I'm going to have probably a lot of tags this year, but I really, there's just something about like I just want to shoot a deer on Texas Public so bad, you know.
I know it.
So I don't know. I just got this feeling, which I have it every year, but like, man, I'm just excited. So,
well, if you didn't have the feeling, then might have to reevaluate some things.
Might need to go pick up golf or something. Anyway, so we mentioned this last time we did a podcast, but we're gonna start a backcountry series here pretty soon. We're starting to do some of these interviews and stockpile them so that we can release them this summer when people are thinking about gear and getting ready to prepare for, as we get ready to prepare for the Gila hunt, and as other people get ready to prepare for their hunting seasons in elk units that are probably much worse than ours. So.
Take that.
Come on. Anyway, I'm pretty excited about all the opportunities that I think we're going to have this year, and I'm not super excited about the hot weather that's going to come, but luckily I get to take me a pretty good vacation, I think, from it. So anyway,
I kind of am excited. Is that weird?
Are you?
I've gotten to where as long as I can get up in the morning and warm up with the day, I like the hot weather.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's making me tough. Like, and I don't have an option.
I don't want to be tough.
Dude, you're gonna have to be.
I'm so fair weather these days, dude. I don't know what it is about me.
You just need to move to Washington. Yeah, or
Yeah.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
San Jose, Costa Rica.
My plan is one day, which I'm currently pursuing a career that doesn't allow this, but is to have two houses and one up, in the mountains and one down here.
It's more attainable than what you think.
I think it is, too.
should have a separate podcast about that one of these days.
Dude, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I think it's a thing that can happen, especially the miracle of the internet really allows that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that more some other time.
Let's do it, man. Let's get somebody on and talk about that, or we
Yeah.
can talk about it. I don't know. You may have some expertise in this whole
I don't
subject.
have expertise, but I've got some. What's the opposite of expert? So
Novice.
novice tees.
You got some novice tees.
You are a novice tee.
Novelty. Anyway,
man.
all right. Well, we're gonna get out of here, guys. I hope you guys are having a great week and have a great weekend. Remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some meat eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls. I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.